Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the IPS Nathan Lecture Series by Professor Lily Kong, our 15th Nassar Nathan Fellow for the Study of Singapore. Today, Professor Kong will be delivering her second lecture titled, At the Crossroads, Universities for the 100-Year Life. Following her lecture, Professor Kong will take questions from the audience in a Q&A session. The Q&A session will be chaired by Professor Chua Kee Chiang, President of Singapore Institute of Technology. Before we begin, please allow me to go over some housekeeping rules for the event. Thank you for joining us at the auditorium today. Please be reminded to switch your mobile phones to silent mode. The lecture is being streamed live on Facebook. It will also be recorded and uploaded onto our IPS website and YouTube channel later. Please submit your comments and questions at any time during the lecture through the Facebook comments. For our audience members here at the auditorium today, please step up to the mic during the Q&A session to ask your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Kong to begin her second lecture titled, At the Crossroads, Universities for the 100-Year Life. Professor Kong, please.
Good afternoon, colleagues, students, friends, ladies and gentlemen. In my first lecture, we had ventured into the looking glass, entering the world of universities as they evolved through the ages, from classical antiquity through to post-industrial society. Just as Alice experienced a kind of paradoxical inversion in the world she entered when she went into Wonderland, I had illustrated how logics we are accustomed to today in the contemporary world of universities may well be a reversal of what they were in earlier times. It is a reminder that we need to be willing to challenge some of our accepted or even taken for granted contemporary beliefs and practices in higher education. In today's lecture, we will undertake precisely that challenge. I highlight 4 dimensions of contemporary higher education as candidates for disruptive thinking. First, universities have focused almost entirely on cognitive skills and development. Yet, the Harvard developmental psychologist Howard Gardner has since 1983 reminded us that human beings have multiple intelligences. Why is it important to go beyond the cognitive? And how should universities embrace the development of individuals beyond the cognitive? Second, in the age of big data and generative AI, universities have rushed to respond to demand for places in data analytics and digital technologies, and to embrace the use of technology in education. Yet, as machines and AI take on more of the functions at the workplace, how are universities helping young people to accentuate their humanity and manage their human vulnerabilities? Third, universities as the culmination of educational journeys for young adults seek to ensure that students have deep subject knowledge, typically taken to mean disciplinary depth. Yet many disciplines are late 19th and early 20th century inventions. How can contemporary universities lead the way in thinking about interdisciplinary depth, in contrast to the usual framing of interdisciplinarity as breadth? How can interdisciplines be valorized alongside disciplines and recognized as a form of deep learning too? Fourth, universities offer a 3- or 4-year journey representing the pinnacle of formal education for most university goers. The vast majority enroll between the ages of 18 and 25, after which they enter the world of work. Yet learning takes place not only in the world of academia, in the formal university, but also in the world of practice, in the world of play, and in the social world. How are universities embracing the different forms and fora for learning and throughout life? These questions are urgent at this historical juncture for a variety of reasons. Most obviously, it is because the world has become more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and because the pace of technological change is unprecedented. but it is also because in increasingly greater parts of the world, there are longer lifespans, lower fertility rates, and therefore aging populations. People are living longer and needing to work deeper into their more senior years as the age dependency ratio worsens. How, what, and when we learn become more critical in facilitating meaningful lives and enabling worthwhile contributions from each individual over longer periods. Before I address these questions, let me paint the context within which they need to be considered. First, I will elaborate on greater longevity and what it implies for individuals, corporations, and governments, and particularly what is needed from universities. Second, I outline the current state of educational delivery and experience in universities around the world. Taken together, the gap between what is needed and what is being delivered will become apparent. The questions I seek to address point a way ahead in the reinvention of universities. I begin by elaborating first on extended longevity and its implications. Let us envisage living the 100-year life. In their prize-winning book in 2016, The 100-Year Life, Linda Grattan and Andrew Scott highlight how advances in medicine, hygiene, and education have and will continue to dramatically extend lifespans, fundamentally altering the structure and scope of modern lives. The possibility of living 100 years is no longer a distant one. It is shaping up into a distinct reality as life expectancy has increased steadily for more than 2 years every decade over the last 200 years. According to the United Nations Population Division, global life expectancy at birth for both sexes has improved from 46.5 years in 1950 to 71.5 years in 2022, and is expected to rise to 77.3 by 2050. In Singapore, life expectancy at birth in 2023 was 83 years. And on the chart, you will see me extrapolating to when we reach 100. At the same time, total fertility rates have been below replacement level for a long time and has recently fallen below 1.0, coming in at a dismal 0.97 in 2023. The combined effect in Singapore is that in 2026, we will become a super-aged society, defined as a country where the proportion of its population aged 65 and above reaches 21%. Grattan and Scott posit that with longevity comes the need to rethink the traditional three-stage life model, where a first stage of education is followed by a second stage of employment and followed finally by retirement. These stages typically progress in lockstep from one to the next, where age is stage. In such a model, as life expectancy increases, people either work longer to support the extra years, or they live on less in later years. Using the example of a 100-year lifer, at what age can one afford to retire if one saves 10% of one's income and wants to retire on 50% of one's final salary? Their answer, into your 80s. Even if this extended work were tolerable, however hard and exhausting it becomes, it would not be tenable for a variety of reasons. First, the nature of work is changing rapidly, and whatever knowledge and skills were learned in one's 20s could not possibly last that long a career lifetime without major added investment in relearning and reskilling. Looking back the last century, with structural economic changes have come the dramatic rise and fall of sectors, and with that, shifts in the composition of employment. Drawing from the work of economists Wyatt and Hecker, it is apparent that from 1910 to 2000, to the year 2000, there was a dramatic decline in employment of farmers, farm laborers, and household and service workers, and a dramatic increase in professional and technical workers. Such dramatic shifts will be replicated over the next 100 years in ways as yet unknown today. In fact, as the shelf life of knowledge shrinks, these dramatic shifts will take place over increasingly shorter periods of time, such that in a 100-year life, there will be multiple transitions into different roles and careers. A second reason why simply extending work life to meet the financial needs of a 100-year life would not be tenable is because to live happily and productively for 100 years goes beyond meeting financial needs. There are non-financial needs as well: family, friendships, mental health, and happiness. What are needed to live the 100-year life are thus both tangible and intangible assets. Put simply, you can't live a long and financially successful career if your skills, health, and relationships are depleted. Within those 100 years, therefore, it is critical to invest and reinvest in all these different dimensions. To do so requires a fundamental redesign of life. In such an evolving paradigm, a shifting, non-linear, interweaving pattern of work, leisure, and learning defines human existence, each pattern unique to every individual. In Grattan and Scott's view, this is a paradigm that emphasizes lifelong learning, adaptability, and social and emotional well-being as core elements of a life lived across an expanded horizon. All these point to an urgent need for society to adapt and change. Employers will have to think about retention, retraining, and rejuvenation differently in this new paradigm. Governments will have to rethink myriad policies, such as retirement ages, and finding ways of addressing unequal life expectancy between different socioeconomic strata. And of course, universities need to adapt and be responsive to these myriad changes. For a start, higher education should no longer be a phase that is only between 18 and 25. Rather, each individual's engagement with universities must be reshaped into a journey that extends throughout their lives, and for some, only later in life. This requires a rethinking of existing university models. It is therefore an appropriate point for me to now paint the second piece of the contextual canvas, focusing on a critique of current educational practices in universities, even while acknowledging that there are many positives in present-day systems. In a university education journey from admissions to graduation, with curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment in between, the following are some limitations in current models in various parts of the world. University enrollment is low, uneven, or declining in many parts of the world. There is rigid curricula, hyper-specialization, decline of the humanities, didactic approaches in pedagogy which still hold sway, and assessment dilemmas and disorders. Let me take each of those in turn. First, uneven access to higher education is reflected in uneven rates of enrollment. In less developed countries, the issue is one of extremely low rates of enrollment, and even these figures mask vast differences in participation between the poorest and richest in each country. I touched on this in my first lecture. The wealthiest tend to benefit most from higher education, and the intergenerational gaps in education and the social mobility that attends widen. Elsewhere, in other parts of the developed world, where lower birth rates have set in, declining enrollments have followed on the heels of massification in higher education. Japan is one example, where the decreasing birth rate means fewer domestic admissions. Meanwhile, the language barrier works against attracting students from abroad, exacerbated by what is observed to be a long-running but unsuccessful drive to secure global rankings for Japanese universities. Declining enrollments do not need, however, to portend university mergers or closures if we rethink the role of universities. I will return to outlining expanded scopes for universities in order to support the 100-year life. Next, rigid curricula. Access and enrollment aside, curricular issues in contemporary universities attract debate and critique. Many universities cling to rigid curricula that require early specialization and offer limited flexibility for students to pivot or explore new interests later in life. Such fixed trajectory is increasingly at odds with the needs of a world where multiple career changes are common. The UK and China exemplify this more traditional and rigid approach. By contrast, more flexible approaches in countries like the US, which embrace modular courses and retain more breadth and choice, offer glimpses of the adaptability needed. Part of the curricular rigidity is tied to the hyper-specialization of knowledge, which has undeniably driven progress within specific fields, but has also created barriers to addressing complex global challenges such as climate change, public health crises, and social inequality. These challenges, by their nature, cut across multiple disciplines and require integrated solutions that draw on diverse areas of expertise. While specialized knowledge is indispensable in certain sectors, the global challenges we face today, and even more so in the future, demand integrative thinking and collaboration that transcends traditional academic boundaries. But entire professions of academics have been socialized into specialized disciplines, and many resist what they see to be the dilettantism of interdisciplinarity. Not only is hyper-specialized knowledge privileged, some disciplines are valorized more than others. In recent times, record numbers have enrolled in computer science courses. Conversely, enrollment in the humanities is in free fall. Between 2013 and 2023, the study of English and history had dropped by a third in the US, and humanities degrees awarded had dropped by nearly 25% between 2012 and 2020. The US is not alone. Between 2015 and 2018, the share of bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees awarded in humanities fell 5%, 11%, and 9% respectively on average throughout the OECD, with drops of varying proportions detected in 24 of 36 OECD countries. The United Kingdom government recently announced in 2021 its intention to reduce funding for arts, social sciences, and humanities degrees it now deems low value. In South Africa, the Academy of Science reported that the number of graduates in the humanities declined year on year between 1996 and 2008, and that's just when the study was done, even as degrees awarded in management grew 11% and degrees in science grew 5%. George Washington University professor Samuel Goldman attributes these trends to the common perception that humanities coursework is overspecialized, lacks obvious vocational practicality, is out of touch with students' needs and interests, and has purported benefits that toe the fine line, I quote, between the intangible and the irrelevant. Students have thus absorbed the view about the impracticality of the humanities and voted with their feet. Yet, as I will argue later, in a world of hyper-technology, it is all the more urgent that we be reminded of our humanity and find ways to accentuate it. Curriculum and degrees aside, the dominant approaches to teaching and learning or pedagogy are remarkably similar in different parts of the world and over long periods of history. The classic didactic approach is everywhere in use, and I'm guilty of using it right now, where information is presented directly from the professor to the student, where the professor determines the topic of instruction, controls the narrative, seeks a response from the student, assesses the student response, and reinforces correct responses while providing negative feedback for incorrect ones. Where the didactic approach has been criticized and alternatives proffered, the Socratic method has been valued. This involves a dialogue between professor and students, typically in the form of questions posed by the professor, stimulating student discussion, and leading to active questioning by the students themselves. The approach is dialogic. As its name implies, this has been in existence since Socrates in the 5th century BC. One would be right to say that pedagogy has not changed for centuries. Principally, in the latter half of the 20th century, work-integrated learning emerged as a form of experiential education, formally integrating a student's academic studies with workplace experience. Cooperative Education and Work-Integrated Learning Canada, or CWIL Canada for short, classifies work-integrated experiential learning in the following ways. And you see it in the word map there, so I'm not going to go through it, right? Cooperative education, community and industry research projects, and so forth. Even while a good range of options do exist, there are increasing efforts to adopt them, opportunities, in fact, remain limited in scope and availability. The separation between academic learning and real-world work experience persists in many higher education systems. In countries like France and Italy, for example, the traditional emphasis on theoretical knowledge often leaves graduates ill-equipped to address practical challenges in the workforce, unlike the German apprenticeship system, which yields higher employment rates. A more integrated approach, where academic learning is seamlessly blended with practical experience, is vital for producing graduates who are ready for the complexities of modern careers. Beyond curricular and pedagogical issues, assessment comes into focus. Experts distinguish between competency-based assessment and traditional assessment. The former focuses on achieving specific learning outcomes, mastering specified competencies and skills, and emphasizes continuous development. The latter emphasizes standardized testing and knowledge retention, and provide final evaluations, and continues to dominate in many parts of the world. Relying on standardized testing leads to other issues, in particular, grade inflation. This has been a matter of concern in the US and elsewhere. Some of the most frequently mentioned causes, the fear of getting poor student evaluations, the avoidance of bad relations with students, professors' lack of experience, below average teaching skills, job security, merit-based financial aid, and so forth. Clearly, these pose credibility issues for universities and employer doubts about graduate quality. It calls to question the rigor in higher education and has led to the cynical view that while admissions processes are based on IQ, graduation is a conscientiousness test. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the tendency towards grade inflation, as well as the mass-scale introduction of pass-fail, which led to the decline of academic rigor. US columnist Elizabeth Grace Matthew put it this way: allowing students endless grace on assignment content and due dates may reduce some students' anxiety, but it does so by fostering a profound fragility that renders them unfit for a harsh world with professional and personal realities and deadlines that can't be massaged through emails to well-meaning teaching assistants. Her observations relate to the need to build greater resilience, a matter to which I will return. While it is critical to fix the gaze on what goes on within universities, as I've just done, it is also important to examine that which goes on beyond universities. There is insufficient time to do justice to the spectrum of economic and societal conditions that impinge on the work that universities do. Nevertheless, minimally, I place in parentheses two dimensions of this context, even if a full exposition is not possible. The first is the economic context. The underinvestment in higher education in numerous parts of the world is holding back the full potential contribution that universities can make. One might almost expect that in the less developed countries, such underinvestment is a given. But in the world's fifth largest economy, India, only 1.2% of its GDP is given to higher education, far below the global average of 4.5%, resulting in universities facing financial crunch. There is a lack of research opportunities for faculty, poor infrastructure, and overall suboptimal student outcomes. Even in the developed world, the lament about the crumbling British system is one that I have shared in my first lecture. The second piece of the contextual frame is political, evident in the kind of crisis that is afflicting universities in the United States, Europe, and elsewhere, where lawsuits, debates, and protests are getting in the way of education. Universities have become the key battlegrounds where culture wars are played out, where different opinions clash on topics such as free speech, affirmative action, and other issues. In such a climate and context, anxiety about the future of universities seems warranted. Let me turn now to graduate outcomes. Sadly, many graduates in various parts of the world now face unemployment or underemployment as their education fails to keep pace with the transformations reshaping the job market. This signals an urgent need for universities to reassess their effectiveness. Let me cite two examples to illustrate the challenges. In 1991, the net enrollment rate in university in Taiwan was 20%, only slightly above the threshold of an elite higher education system. It quickly increased to 50% in 2004, reaching the mass threshold, and then 70% in 2013, reaching universal coverage. The percentage of high school graduates entering university reached 95% in 2008 and has remained more or less constant since. However, this extremely high enrollment rate reflects the failure of the system to be selective and a decline of competitiveness within higher education. Of concern is the fact that the overall unemployment rate in Taiwan in August 2024 was 3.36%, while the youth unemployment rate, defined as job seekers between the ages of 20 and 24, was almost 4 times of that at 12.21%. In China, in 2009, sociologist Lian Si coined the term Yizhu, or ant tribe, to describe struggling graduates from provincial areas flocking to megacities. An estimated 100,000 lived in Beijing alone in 2010. This group of highly educated young people were compelled to accept low-paying, temporary positions and endure substandard living conditions, highlighting the disconcerting contrast between educational attainment and employment outcomes. Today, China's graduate unemployment crisis is worsening. Urban youth unemployment among the roughly 100 million Chinese aged between 16 and 24 spiked to 17% in July 2024, a figure that analysts say masks millions of rural unemployed. over 200 million people are currently working in the gig economy, which itself faces overcapacity issues. Some graduates have been forced to rely on parental support, leading to the label of professional children. This situation raises long-term concerns for economic stability and potential social unrest. Meanwhile, some young Chinese faced with high unemployment are embracing their jobless status as a lifestyle choice rather than a personal failure. Termed unproductive forces, these individuals reject the intense work culture and opt for a slower lifestyle. Some opt to lie flat or 躺平, going for a less demanding life. Even those with steady jobs are resisting. Recently, the Chinese version of TikTok or Douyin has witnessed a popular trend of young people wearing gross outfits at work and posting pictures of themselves going to the office in onesies, sweatpants, and sandals with socks, the just rolled out of bed look that is too informal for most Chinese workplaces. This cultural shift is paralleled elsewhere in the world in the trend of quiet quitting, where employees do only what is required and no more. It reflects a desire for better work-life harmony and mental well-being and meaningful engagement in work. This shift indicates that the traditional metrics of job success are evolving and underscores a broader global trend that, in fact, fits well with the multi-stage life that Grattan and Scott write about, a life in which the current intensity of work cannot be extended for longer periods in the 100-year life. As we confront the fundamental redesign of life needed to sustain a century of living, and the appropriateness of existing higher educational practices to support this redesign, I use the rest of today's lecture to lay out the choices universities must make at this crossroad. I will examine the need for individual and institutional reinvention to meet the demands of a 100-year life. These acts of disruption and reinvention center on 4 themes as outlined earlier: the importance of going beyond the cognitive, the criticality of accentuating our humanity and managing human vulnerability, the cultivation of interdisciplinary depth, and the commitment to a lifelong journey with students. First, universities of the future will need to develop not just cognitive abilities that typically lead to employment and the accumulation of tangible financial assets. Universities have a role and responsibility to cultivate the intangible assets that derive from a development of intelligences beyond the cognitive. Howard Gardner, professor at Harvard Graduate School of Education, had famously published his theory about multiple intelligences back in 1983 in his book Frames of Mind, The Theory of Multiple Intelligences. He posited that people have different kinds of intelligences, namely verbal linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, visual, bodily kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalist, and existential. His theory has been criticized for lack of empirical evidence, and that his intelligences are but different talents, personality traits, and abilities. Nevertheless, many educators have embraced his theory and sought to integrate it in their practice. How they are labeled is of less interest to me than their essence. 2 observations attend to universities. First, universities tend to focus on those intelligences that relate to the cognitive. And second, even within this emphasis on the cognitive, universities tend to focus on the content or curriculum of what is to be taught and learned rather than how. What I refer to as cognitive intelligences are those that call on mental ability associated with intellectual functions such as comprehension, thinking, conceptualization, and reasoning. Thus, universities develop logical, mathematical intelligence, obviously through mathematics, verbal, linguistic intelligence through language and literature, spatial, visual intelligence through architecture, and naturalist intelligence through botany. Those are just some examples. The emphasis is often on what goes into the curriculum for different disciplines, and the dominant structure of universities with faculties and departments are based on disciplinary content. With technological advancements, and especially artificial intelligence, content is easily available online. AI even allows for customization of educational content to meet individual needs, enhancing learner engagement and outcomes. What technology affords is ironically a much-needed shift to a more human-centered education if we use it well. So faculty need to shift. Faculty must move beyond didactic teaching to become facilitators of discussions, debates, and critical thinking. Seminar-style interactive sessions are much better in this regard than large unidirectional lecture formats, stimulating debate and encouraging the challenging of assumptions. Learning is a social activity. Some of us may have seen a video circulating during the pandemic when a lecturer at a local university was delivering his class online and talked at length for 3 hours as he would in a lecture hall. Throughout the session, he was unaware that his students could not hear him and oblivious to messages being sent to him via various platforms. His expression at the end of the 3 hours was priceless. The horror of talking to himself the entire time. It was a horror anchored in the prospect of having to deliver the class all over again. Not one born of a realization that his pedagogical approach is no longer appropriate. With AI tools that aid education, educators must use the freed up time to focus on more stimulating pedagogies and on how to develop other intelligences. Experiential learning, or the process of learning by doing, will need to take on greater significance, and I will return to this later. Suffice to say for now that pedagogies cannot be the afterthought or the stepchild to curriculum. More interesting than the cognitive intelligences that universities focus on is what universities neglect, or at best leave to the extracurricular space. Music and dance fall primarily into the latter category, except, of course, in arts colleges and conservatories. So any development of musical and bodily kinesthetic intelligence is purely incidental. Given the importance of keeping health spans as close in tandem with lifespans as possible, that is, the number of years someone is healthy without chronic and debilitating disease is as close to the number of years someone lives from birth to death, it seems a missed opportunity not to develop the musical and bodily kinesthetic intelligences early in life, inculcating the habits of healthy living. Ironically, while 97% of US college students had physical education and exercise requirements to fulfill in the 1920s, this had fallen to 39% in 2012 when that particular study was undertaken. Further, intrapersonal and interpersonal intelligences are never given the same attention as cognitive intelligences, if at all. The former, intrapersonal intelligence, is defined as self-awareness and being in tune with one's inner feelings, values, and beliefs. And interpersonal intelligence as the ability to detect and respond appropriately to the moods, motivations, and desires of others. Personal growth, well-being, and inner resilience, what makes up intrapersonal intelligence, plays second fiddle in many university models that prioritize academic and professional skills. Emotional intelligence, interpersonal effectiveness, and intercultural understanding have been given more lip service in recent times, but are seldom embedded systematically as learning outcomes. Attendance systems linked with appropriate pedagogy and formative assessment are absent, unlike those developed for cognitive intelligence. How might universities begin to develop the intrapersonal intelligence of young people, and to what end? First, there is no overstating the importance of building resilience, essential for navigating the challenges and uncertainties of the future. The extended pressure of prolonged education, frequent career transition, and navigating an increasingly dynamic job market can take a significant toll on mental health. As Ravi Velu wrote recently in the Straits Times, it is resilience, not just reskilling, that is critical in an age of job disruptions. Universities have a role to help students shore up emotional resilience to face challenges and recover from setbacks. The resilience that universities help to build up in younger years must become a deeper resource that individuals can draw on through life. Building resilience is thus much more than implementing a range of support services such as mental health resources, counseling, stress management, and peer support programs, which have become common since COVID-19. These are much needed, don't get me wrong, but developing resilience as proactive capacity is more critical for the long term than providing support as reactive service. To build resilience proactively entails promoting opportunities for social connections, creating environments where friendships are forged and mentoring relationships developed, where community engagement and involvement and wellness practices like mindfulness are systematically introduced. All are instrumental in nurturing social and emotional resilience and in building support systems in personal and professional lives. They need to be intentional and deserve planning and institutional enablers, much like the attention that curriculum has been given. Many of these efforts will contribute to both intrapersonal as well as interpersonal intelligences, and I'll return to this later when I address the issue of accentuating our humanity and managing our human vulnerabilities. Beside building resilience, a second aspect of intrapersonal intelligence is self-awareness, which facilitates the ability to think and chart independent pathways. As Grattan and Scott put it, long lives are lives of transitions. Some of these transitions will be in the company of others, but for many, there will be no cohort to offer support. Simply following the herd is not going to work. In a way that past generations simply didn't have to do, each one of us will need to think about who we are and how we construct our life and how this reflects our identity and values. In all the educational systems around the world, the well-laid out pathways from K to 12 and then tertiary education with a rigid curriculum set out clearly for students to follow means that choices, where they can be made, are made along set paths and within boundary parameters defined for us. Yet, simply following the herd is not going to work. And so the famed Standard Life Design Lab director Bill Burnett, who co-authored Designing Your Life, How to Build a Well-Lived, Joyful Life, promulgates self-awareness as the ultimate key to thriving in an uncertain time. Through the series of design courses such as Designing Your Stanford, Designing Your Life, and Designing the Professional, design thinking is used to help students design a fulfilling college experience or design their lives and vocations after Stanford. Such an approach respects that students should construct their lives with independence of thought, anchored in what they value and believe in. In recent weeks, Republic Polytechnic has announced their own Design Your Life program, patterned after Stanford's, encouraging students to connect their work and life views offering them the tools to explore and plan their goals with intention. In 2022, Singapore Management University announced their own individualized major, recognizing the uniqueness of each student, their potential, and the societal or industry challenge that they are passionate about. The individualized major avoids prefabricated curriculum, encouraging instead students to navigate a path through the entire spectrum of courses available at the university to curate a combination that hones their understanding of the challenge they choose to address in integrative ways. To do this requires self-awareness and independent thinking. Simply following the herd is not going to work. A third aspect of intrapersonal intelligence is a spirit of exploration and experimentation. When individuals confront a world where they have to periodically start afresh, they will need to be comfortable with exploration and cultivate a willingness to try new ways of thinking and doing. Let me here return to Alice in Wonderland, where Lewis Carroll invented the word galumphing, possibly a portmanteau of galloping and triumphant. The concept connotes exaggerated and exultant sprints and bolts. Anthropologists use the term to refer to exuberant, unstructured play, acting at times clumsily, without a specific goal in mind. In the world of learning and work, it seems a playful, spontaneous, and uneconomical approach to problem solving. Yet, such spontaneity often leads to unexpected discoveries. In Lewis Carroll's world, Alice's adventures exemplify this playful exploration where curiosity and improvisation open new possibilities. It is this spirit of galumphing that we can embrace more, a willingness to break from tight structures and embrace spontaneity and a spirit of exploration. Such an attitude can be caught, not taught. It can be facilitated, such as through crucible experiences and independent production. A crucible experience is a transformative experience through which an individual comes to a new or altered state of awareness and identity. Living in a new city or immersing oneself in unfamiliar environments offer such opportunities for personal development and self-discovery, provided you don't stick with Singaporeans only. Universities should facilitate crucible experiences. They help individuals challenge their values, reflect on their identities, and develop a stronger sense of self. While it is easy to offer the opportunity for a student exchange semester or an internship overseas, the activity itself is not learning. It is the self-reflexivity that turns activity into learning, then into valuable experience. That self-reflexivity is the current gap in most universities. Another approach to cultivating a spirit of exploration and experimentation is to provide opportunities for independent production. Especially in societies where structure and hierarchy are pronounced, it is important to create opportunities for young people to engage in self-direction and independent innovation, to take risks, to prototype new ideas, and to pursue self-driven projects. Ironically, we can actually structure for self-direction, such as creating the space for students to design their own major. And I'm not advocating it for everyone, but for some, that is an opportunity for independent production. Whether it's galumphing, crucible experiences, or independent production, they require loosening up structures and embracing what seems to be some inefficiencies. These are uncomfortable in highly structured, productivity-conscious societies. To facilitate better when students seek to change course of study, to support students who choose to take leave of absence in the midst of their degrees to try different things, and to be comfortable when some graduate and fail to work in the industry immediately related to their course of study. All these require different measures of success. They require that universities not be judged by the time taken to graduation as a measure of efficiency and success. They require a mindset that the so-called leakage between course of study and first profession is not unequivocally negative, accepting that we cannot predict with high degrees of accuracy how many in which professions we need. Neither can we plan and enforce with absolute precision how many universities must train in which area. Some level of galumphing, at least on the margins, must be encouraged and not just tolerated. So far, you've been patient with my elaborated call for us to look beyond the cognitive. A second major area of disruption and reinvention that universities must consider is how they are to cultivate individuals to bring value in an age where AI can do so much. What can humans do that AI cannot? Or what can AI do that humans can do better? Here are some. To make good judgments about people and situations. To have an intuitive understanding of human emotions and cultural contexts. To own a curious mind and have a passion or two, and to manifest resilience. This calls for a human-centered education that offers essential skills that machines cannot replicate or cannot easily replicate. Human intuition, creativity, empathy, and other qualities that all add up to this intrapersonal intelligence. Michael Polanyi, a British-Hungarian philosopher, had highlighted in his book, The Tacit Dimension, how much of human knowledge is actually tacit and difficult to articulate, perhaps even beyond explicit understanding. Thus, even while AI offers immense potential, there is something about human intuition and tacit understanding that is irreplaceable. Polanyi's paradox, as it has come to be known, is about how human beings can undertake many tasks which we understand intuitively how to perform, but cannot verbalize as rules or procedures. Similarly, Moravec's paradox suggests that while machines excel at intellectual tasks, they struggle with basic human abilities like physical perception and social interaction. Together, both paradoxes stress the importance of cultivating the distinctly human qualities in students. To do so, universities must offer courses that give insights into the human condition through the arts, humanities, and social sciences. This call can be likened to entering Alice's looking glass, where logics are reversed. In a world where enrollment in the humanities is in free fall, it seems counterintuitive to suggest that universities should offer such courses. But the reverse logic is not illogical. In studying the humanities, we learn about humanity, or what it means to be human. Through literature and history, we see, for example, the martyrdom of self-sacrificing leaders as much as the viciousness of ambition. We gain insights into what it means to have a kindred spirit, but also a cruel enemy. We witness the tenderness of human love, the pain of loss, and the joy of reunion. In an age of hyper-technology, all the more reason why we need the humanities. Where robots can dispense medicines and chatbots replace human conversations, the jobs that will withstand the Fourth Industrial Revolution are precisely the ones that require an understanding of human nature and a reliance on human empathy. The decline of the humanities in various parts of the world is thus in direct opposition to what the world needs now. But teaching about the human condition is not the same as being human. Grattan and Scott remind us that tangible assets are only one dimension of living a 100-year life. Having the financial resources is important, but so too are intangible assets, supportive family, great friends, and good physical and mental health. To build a productive long life, the combination of the tangible and intangible are important. In fact, they are not independent. intangible assets are important in themselves, but they also play an important reciprocal role in the development of tangible assets. For a network of supportive and knowledgeable friends are crucial for optimizing transitions and broadening career choices, while poor health and unhappy families reduce productivity and creativity at work. Further, these assets, these intangible assets and tangible assets, depreciate over time. Even intangible assets depreciate over time. If we fail to invest by keeping in touch with friends and keeping engaged in sports, friendships and health will eventually depreciate and even dissipate. It seems odd to even think that universities should get in this space. But this is precisely where universities and the broader society need to think differently about what the role of universities should be. If university is to prepare one for life, then it is as important during one's years of the university to develop firm friendships, develop a passion for volunteering, get to know like-minded lovers of dance and tennis and theatre, or even fall in love and find a life partner. These are part of being human and are intangible assets that stay with us for significant periods of our lives, if not for life. Universities will do well to provide platforms for the accumulation of such intangible assets, such as offering residential programs, supporting myriad student clubs and sports, shaping opportunities to work with communities in need, and so on. These are the experiences that will hone the skills that generative AI will not be able to. For university leaders and governments, our business as usual response will be that we already do all of this. They are all available to interested students, and perhaps no new thinking, leave alone resources, need be contemplated. Yet, these sorts of activities need to be understood not as extracurricular, but as central to a revised notion of curriculum. They deserve similar resources, systems, and structures of support as curriculum, classrooms, and IT. For example, while funding lecture halls and building classrooms is de rigueur in the current paradigm, the attitude is that student residences, sports facilities, spaces for student clubs, and the like can be downsized or even done away with. In the university, for a 100-year life, these are as central to preparation for life as classrooms are. Our current thinking, therefore, needs to shift very fundamentally. Let me now turn to a third dimension of contemporary higher education as a candidate for disruptive thinking. The complexity of global challenges such as climate change, public health, and social inequality cannot be addressed through isolated disciplinary approaches. Both STEM disciplines and humanities, arts, and social sciences disciplines are needed to address global and local challenges. Science and technology tell us what can be done. For example, what vaccines can be produced with known science and technology, what speed and distance can be covered by electric vehicles with what level of reduced carbon footprint when compared to petrol-run vehicles, and what depth of underground construction can be achieved with extant engineering prowess, creating what kind of capacity for housing offices and other infrastructures, to cite just a few examples. But science does not tell us why vaccines are embraced or rejected, why car owners are not rushing to convert to electric vehicles, and why technologies to build underground would not lead to housing shortages in land-scarce cities being addressed more rapidly. The answers to these questions lie in psychological, social, cultural, and economic factors. Human behavior frequently resists change due to psychological factors and ingrained habits. The inconvenience of lengthy battery charging, range anxiety, and the higher retail prices create barriers to EV adoption. Vaccine hesitancy stems from peer influence, amplified by the rapid spread of misinformation online. Cognitive biases further distort risk perceptions and amplify fears. The lack of direct sunlight and the fear of living underground, including the cultural association with death and burial, limit the types of users that the underground can be put to. Addressing these issues requires more than technological fixes. Policy interventions need to be grounded in an understanding of human motivations, social mores, economic dynamics, and cultural symbolisms. The social sciences and humanities are not handmaidens to STEM, nor is the reverse true. Without the social sciences and humanities framing the great issues of the day and providing the why for what needs doing, and the why of what will or will not be done, the what that science and technology enable will be inadequate. And without STEM, there would be no vaccine or electric vehicles to start. Universities must promote interdisciplinary learning, encourage students to think across traditional boundaries, and explore the intersections of different fields. However, disciplines have come to exert such sway on our thinking about the world that there is a significant hazard at stake. That is, education is applauded when it is disciplinary and deep, but interdisciplinarity is conceived as good for breadth but lacking in depth. Let me unpick this thinking. First, disciplines are human creations. In my first lecture, I shared that new specializations and increased professionalization in fields of study emerged only in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, hastened when the breadth of knowledge grew, leading to the formal growth of disciplines. Thus, disciplines as we know them are not God-given, naturally existing ways of knowing the world. Second, there is generalist interdisciplinarity, and there is integrationist interdisciplinarity. The former refers to any form of dialogue or interaction between two or more disciplines. The latter, the integrationist interdisciplinarity, believes that integration should be the goal of interdisciplinary work, to address the challenge of complexity. Indeed, interdisciplines, as fields of study that cross traditional disciplinary boundaries and are truly integrative, may become new disciplines over time. Neuroscience, material science, and biochemistry are often cited as examples of interdisciplines becoming disciplines. Environmental studies, urban studies, sustainability studies, cultural studies, these are cited as highly integrated, though there are different views about whether they are as yet disciplines in their own right. Third, taking off from the examples cited, we can disrupt the thinking that interdisciplinarity is only about breadth, with the implication that it lacks depth and rigor. Might there be a path to acknowledging and celebrating the depth that one develops in a thematic area, such as the environment, the city, sustainability, aging, or something else? The prevailing structure of knowledge is disciplinary. So a sociology major is said to have depth in sociology because of the range of causes enrolled in. Sociology of the family, medical sociology, sociology of work, sociology of deviance. The phenomena in focus in all these causes are quite varied, but there is a universally recognized core of sociological knowledge cutting across the themes, the so-called depth. Yet, if I were to design my life and dedicate it to the study and practice of, let's just say, cities, and I enrolled in a range of courses, for example, urban history, urban geography, sociology of the city, urban policy, urban culture, and so forth, is it conceivable that I would develop a significant depth in the understanding of cities? I therefore make the case that universities can, and indeed must, make some space for interdisciplinary depth alongside disciplinary depth and interdisciplinary breadth. There will be those who will protest that many universities already do this, but I will counter with two observations. First, there remains within academia some intellectual disciplinary snobbery. Academics in the room, don't hunt me, right? But there will be some of that tolerates these interdisciplinary majors, and among employers who worry that students are simply taking a mishmash of courses. And I tried to demonstrate how it is not a mishmash. Second, When push comes to shove and universities face a financial crunch, the departments and majors that are shut down are likely to be the interdisciplines. It is the world's loss. Let me now turn to my fourth and last recommendation for disruptive thinking. The prevailing view in many parts of the world regards education as a finite process largely confined to youth. This perspective is increasingly at odds with the realities of a 100-year life, where continuing learning is necessary. Although institutions like Finland's open university system are leading the way in promoting lifelong learning, such models are not yet widespread. In Singapore, universities and polytechnics have been on a journey of change over the last decade or so, but the mainstay remains undergraduate education and latterly postgraduate education. The most obvious approach to supporting multi-stage lives is to introduce professional and continuing education programs available throughout the life course of adults, best delivered as flexible learning options like modular courses, certifications, and professional development programs. A more sophisticated approach, one might say, leverages AI and data analytics to personalize content, thus offering tailored learning experiences that match individual career aspirations. Yet, it is not simply a technical approach of ensuring supply. Universities, employers, and individuals need some fundamental shifts in continued learning in a 100-year life. 3 types of integration are necessary. First, universities need to find age-integrative strategies to extract the most value from their programs. Second, individuals need to reimagine time and welcome the integration of leisure and learning. Third, employers need to embrace work-integrated learning. Let me take each of those in turn. In the 100-year life, Grattan and Scott highlight what they call generational complexity in a multi-stage life. Because age is not stage, people from different age groups will pursue similar life stages at different ages. An 18-year-old could well be embarking on a first degree at the same time as a 32-year-old or a 50-year-old. But their life experiences would be quite different. There is value in minimally developing interpersonal skills across age groups to dismantle the generational isolationism that comes with the typical institutional separation of different age groups. Universities struggle with this, and the easy strategy would be to separate learners undertaking the same course into different age cohorts. Familiar rationale include how those of different age groups learn in different ways. Yet something is lost in the process. Creating educational environments that foster engagement across all ages reaps benefits of peer learning, making available different skills and experiences to the class. Intentional pedagogies are needed, not yet well developed. Next, when we reconceptualize education and work against the backdrop of a 100-year life, we should also rethink our relationship with time. Grattan and Scott suggest that as the traditional boundaries between education, work, and leisure blur, attitudes towards and approaches to recreation will change and should change. Rather than simply watching TV or going on vacation as a way to recover or disconnect from work, leisure activities can be transformed into opportunities for recreation, where people actively invest in acquiring new skills, building relationships, and pursuing personal growth. In a tightly efficient society like Singapore, it is frowned upon, perhaps, for Singaporeans to take up a skills future course in baking if there is no intention to enter the industry. This is considered recreational, maybe even frivolous. It is understandable when the courses are heavily subsidized. However, Grattan and Scott's point is precisely that leisure time may be the time to undertake activities that are fun and allow the learning of skills that may sometimes lead directly into a new career, but at other times foster the kind of curiosity and skill diversification that will become invaluable only at some unknown point later in a long life. As a society, should we allow space to invest time in what appears to be peripheral learning or galumphing, explorations that may not be immediately consequential, but can become stepping stones for living a 100-year life that continues to be fulfilling and impactful? Now to the third integration, and perhaps the most familiar, work-learn or work-study integration. The most well-known ones include the cooperative program in Canada's University of Waterloo and Northeastern University in the US. They entail alternating academic terms and paid work terms, and Singapore universities have adopted and adapted this model as well. The German system of apprenticeships predates this model with its provenance in 1897, but there are similar and different elements across these different models. Work-integrated learning may involve whole degree programs, but bite-sized versions of experiential learning can be valuable too. Programs that involve project-based learning, simulations, real-world problem solving, bridge the gap between academic concepts and their practical use. MIT's Media Lab exemplifies this approach well by engaging students in interdisciplinary projects that tackle real-world challenges. At my own institution, the award-winning SMUX approach adopts a similar philosophy. All this is known territory. The big opportunity is to adopt similar approaches in continuing education throughout life. When an individual undertakes to learn new skills or deepen existing ones, attending a course seems like taking time out of work, with an opportunity cost to bear, both for the individual and the employer. However, if the learning is paired with a project at work, it is an investment by the employer and a deliverable by the individual. This is what Michelle Wise, a frequent commentator on the future of work and education, calls integrated earning and learning, where education and training is integrated with existing work responsibilities. This is not rocket science and has been attempted by some, but it does require a new learning ecosystem if we are to expand this. Let me conclude. For the contemporary university to navigate the crossroads of change, I have proposed 4 disruptions. First, to embrace the responsibility of developing multiple intelligences, including those beyond the cognitive. Second, to accentuate and cultivate human qualities more strongly. Third, to create space for interdisciplinary depth. And fourth, to journey with individuals as lifelong partners. Universities must embrace the responsibility of preparing individuals for a world where living well to 100 is no longer an exception, but the norm. In this longevity landscape, higher education, alongside pre-tertiary education, lifelong learning, and public education, all have significant roles to play in shifting our mental model of educational institutions and their roles. As our lifespans lengthen, will universities themselves endure and remain relevant for the next 100 years? 3 of the world's institutions that have functioned continuously without major disruption are the church, the military, and the university. With their 900-year provenance, why would universities not exist for the next 100 or more? As I outlined in my first lecture, universities have morphed over time through the centuries, reflecting the changing social and economic context within which they existed. So to the question of whether universities will exist in 100 years' time, my response is an emphatic yes, but only if universities take bold, transformative steps and their milieu allows it. The future belongs to institutions that can pivot, and it is my hope that if universities consider, perhaps even implement some of the ideas discussed today, they will not only survive but flourish and positively impact society for the century to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof Kong. For those watching the lecture on Facebook, please submit your comments and questions through the Facebook comment box. For our audience members here, please step up to the mic to ask your questions. May I now invite Professor Chua Kee Chiang, President of Singapore Institute of Technology, to start the Q&A session.
Well, thank you very much, Lily. I really enjoyed the lecture.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very nicely structured lecture that actually lays out the challenges that contemporary universities face. Maybe let me just start the Q&A by asking the first question. I think, both of us are presidents of universities and we are running universities. So, what are some of the key challenges you think in terms of implementing, some of the changes that you have so well articulated?
Yes, as I was writing the lecture, I kept thinking somebody's going to ask me, so what are you doing about it? So you're right. I mean, what are some of, there's one thing about imagining ideas and there's another about turning them into plans and execution. And we all exist within certain contexts. I alluded to some of them. We exist within certain academic contexts that are very much dominated by disciplinary thinking. And so interdisciplinarity and introducing that runs against very deep-seated biases, I want to say. That's one example. If we think about, moving away from a very structured approach to things and you want to allow some degree of galumphing, as I've called it, borrowing from, Lewis Carroll, then there are structures that might hem us in, right? So if universities are asked to report on, the number of years that a student takes to graduate, if universities have to demonstrate that, if 100 students did law, 100 become lawyers, that's good. If 95 become lawyers, what happened? Why the leakage, right? So I completely understand that investments need returns, but some level of loosening up, on the margins at least, allow us to reap benefits that may not be immediate, but allow us to have a little bit more flexibility as such. So what I'm saying is that we all exist within context, within the context of universities and academia and disciplines and long-standing approaches to things, and we all exist within societal contexts where there are economic and social imperatives that we need to respond to. And in order to be able to make some of the changes, some of these factors need to change, and they're not easy.
Thank you very much. So maybe I can open up to the floor now if there's any questions from the audience here. There are 4 mics, so if you ask a question, please introduce yourself first and keep your question short. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk, Prof Kong. So my question, I'll try to keep it short. I really liked your argument about interdisciplinarity.
Would you like to introduce yourself first?
Oh, I'm Sarah. I'm a lecturer from the Singapore University of Social Sciences, SUSS. Yes, sorry, I forgot the acronym. I just started in July, so...
Just as well, your president is not here today.
So I have a bit of a preamble to contextualize my question. Hyper-specialization, you mentioned, tends to arise from disciplines which is useful to deal with problems with which we are familiar. So this is a legacy not just from the 19th century of institutions, but also from the 18th century suspicion of anomalies, and of which the Renaissance reveled in the marvelous and the curious. And so the 18th century favored regularities of having science explain what is regular in society and in the universe. So natural philosophers from the 16th century would ask much wider questions than the modern scientist. For example, Newton thought it was perfectly acceptable to speculate on the relationship about gravitation and also the relationship to God. So how might we balance then the structure, which tends towards rigidity and hyper-specialization, and the loosening of the structure, which tends towards kind of anarchy of knowledge, which finds no easy metric of learning? Might the way forward be to look back to a renaissance of different kinds of knowledge and expertise? Or how, in other words, might galumphing look like in practical terms, and does it necessarily start with the university? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question. I just want to clarify that I am not suggesting that we dismantle structures altogether. I think there is a place for the structures and the disciplines. And if I were going to see a doctor, I want the doctor to have that deep medical, rigorous knowledge. But at the same time, I do think that there are other kinds of challenges in the world today, climate change, etc., have been named, which do require that interdisciplinarity. And so I do think that in today's context, I don't think it's either or, and that we need to dismantle existing structures for new structures altogether. I think what we do need to do is create some space for that loosening up, that galumphing, and I think that it is the combination of the two that is needed today. So, you know, I mean, I've tried to do that in the context of my own university, working with my colleagues to set up a new college of integrative studies, which very insistently looks at the integration of different bodies of knowledge, addressing particular global grand challenges, or local challenges for that matter, but other parts of the university remain structured as disciplines, and I think it's the combination that the world needs.
I think that flexibility is not for everyone anyway.
Indeed, indeed, I fully agree with that. So, you know, to my point earlier about it needs a certain self-awareness, a certain independence of thought, and a certain readiness for that. And some are more ready than others, some are more suited than others. So I'm not suggesting a one-size-fits-all, the size being the new size.
Any other question?
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Kong, for a very inspirational talk. My name is Hannah, I'm from NTU, and I would like to ask you a question about the disciplinary snobbery. For background, I graduated with double degrees in computer science and law more than 30 years ago, and I can attest to the snobbery to which you refer. But my question is, how do you propose to, I guess, overcome or wipe out that snobbery? Because in my 30-year career, I have seen and continue to see the biases towards traditional disciplinary, say, journal publications. So if you cannot get over that hurdle, even with your own academic staff and with, I guess, hiring and promotion and tenure and so on and so forth, how do we spread it to the students? That's my question, because I will soon be retiring and I cannot see it happening within my career, which I think is a little bit sad. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have heard academics talk about this over time, and there is no shortcut to it. I think it needs to be quite intentional and quite deliberate, and it's a very patient game. So at my own institution, my colleague, the provost, is here, and both of us have been partners in crime. And you know, we have had cases for promotion and tenure come to us where somebody is in, let's just say, fictional, but somebody is in finance and has published in an economics journal. And the finance colleagues will say, what? This is not a finance journal, even though it's the top economics journal. Deny promotion. Right? So it does take someone who has a partner in crime, who happens to be chair of the promotion committee and the deputy chair of the promotion committee, to actually then say, no, we're gonna promote that person. But it is not just an institutional challenge, it's a global academic challenge, because global academia is structured in such a way that you need to solicit letters from people in the field from all over the world, and if you don't pick the right people, those are very disciplinary in their approach, they will behave like the so-called finance professors that I talked about. And so every step of the way, it's almost like trench warfare. Every step of the way, whether it's in hiring, in annual appraisals, in promotion, etc., we need to walk the talk. But in order to do that, we need a conversion of thinking amongst those who hold the, who are the gatekeepers, the goalkeepers as such. So I'm not sure if I'll see it in my lifetime, but I certainly want to try and work at it in my little patch of the garden.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other question?
Huang Hun had a question.
I thought Huang Hun wanted to ask a question.
And Irene.
Yes,
Hi.
go ahead.
I'm Irene Ho, graduate of University of Singapore in 1974. I listened, I said, I'm very glad I came to this lecture, because I now realize that in my time at the university I was galumphing and I had no idea what I was doing. What I actually did while I was, I thought I was going to be a doctor, and then I changed my mind. Then when I went to university, I decided to do arts, but I still like the sciences, and I'm very grateful to people like Dr. Liu Tan for letting me sit in on his lectures in zoology, and I went to botany classes, philosophy, sociology, because every time I had a lecture with a certain lecturer who I didn't really learn anything from, I decided I'm going to go to a lecture where I'm going to enjoy myself and learn something. I didn't know that this was going to be something that should be cherished and then followed. So what I guess you can start off with is, maybe we can start with changing the minds of lecturers, putting them through an intensive course and changing their minds, because I'm truly grateful to, especially to the lecturers in zoology who actually welcomed me, took me on their excursions and all that. And the other lecturers of philosophy, and I only got thrown out of one class, and that was law. And that was quite spectacular. So I don't think I'll ever change her mind, the lecturer, but I thought maybe you need to start with the lecturers in a kind of a, kind of an insidious way, and grow it that way, and get the students to say, I like that idea. And maybe every university should say, okay, can we let the students, or make it possible, make it more possible for the students to take cross-disciplinary, I don't know what it's like now, but to take cross-disciplinary courses. I did that. I didn't do the exams, which was wonderful, but I just thought, I love the idea of what you propose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Huang Hun?
I think you turned out pretty well after galumphing.
Thank you, Lily. I'm Huang Hun, NUS. I'm just thinking about people like ourselves. We coming from the side of campus that's named the humanities. We've experienced over the decades the ups and downs of how humanities is looked upon. A lot of the time as a second cousin to the rest of campus. And now that with the onslaught of AI, we are now hearing conversations about restoring the human again. And in your lecture, I'm hearing about how humanities have got to be restored. I guess my question is, what is the role of STEM education in restoring the human in society, in our community, and in the curriculum? Is it just the role of humanities? I somehow do not think that is the answer.
I'm not sure I entirely understood.
Your question is, what is the role of STEM?
Yeah, what is the role of STEM education of the sciences in helping us to restore the human in our curriculum?
The humanness.
Yeah.
So for me, I think ideally it wouldn't be, here, take some courses in the humanities and suddenly you become more human. I think it needs to be integrative. That in the same course, and I think university core curriculums, and many universities have that, university core curriculums have courses that deal thematically with issues of the day that confront us, and you bring to bear both the science and technology perspectives and the humanities perspectives at the same time. And that's how the integration, or at least the integrative conversations and dialogues can take place. So, I would hope that we can do more of those integrative courses rather than to take some humanities here, some science there, and therefore we have, voila, become integrative.
I think that's the real challenge. Getting the two professors to come together and prepare the course, rather than letting the student just take courses from different disciplines. I think that's the real challenge. Okay, one more here, and then I'm going to take two questions from online.
Thank you so much. Prof. Lily, thank you so much for this lecture. What follows is actually the previous lecture, right, where I challenged you.
Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Helena Chu. Sorry, let me start from beginning then. I'm Helena Chu. I facilitate the deepening of dialogues that leads into self-awareness and reflections in small groups, in church, and with Harvard alumni. So, Prof. Lily, in your previous lecture, I challenged a system of human flourishing. It is indeed very heartening to hear this lecture today. And I'm very encouraged to hear you deliver with conviction that simply following the herd is not going to work. So I concur that facilitating learning, meaningful lives, and enabling worthwhile contributions is very important going forward. So here I offer all of you here, including Madam Ho Ching, Tan Chong Ming, SUSS SIT, and all presidents, together with Prof. Lily, to experience conversations that lead to human flourishing, that deepen conversations, deepen dialogues, deepen reflections, so that it leads to our personal conversion before we can be the force to convert the university learning. Okay? If Harvard alumni can say that my brilliant hosting and moderating has helped them, I'm sure it is worth your try too. Shall we?
Thank you very much. Okay, Lily, if I may turn to an online. So this question is, to what degree has the system of world university rankings created some of the issues and problems you've highlighted?
Come back to the third lecture again. I'm going to deal with it then. But seriously, I mean, I think some of the challenges of rankings is that they tend to be very reductionistic in terms of, measuring different dimensions of teaching and learning and research. And a phrase that I've used quite often is the seduction of simplicity. That it's, very easy to say, is the university good? Let's look at the league table. If you're number 34, you must be better than number 35. The reductionism and the seduction of simplicity. The challenge with that is that the metrics tend to be quite simplistic, and so in one of the well-used rankings, the quality of teaching and learning is reduced to one metric, and that's the faculty-student ratio. And how can it be that all the work of universities is reduced to that one metric? So yes, I think they are certainly party to the problems.
I guess it's also ranking, in a sense, a lot of the ranking is based on research. And I think in recent years, I mean, in the last 10, 15 years, definitely, I think the prioritization of research would have also led to some of the issues that you have highlighted.
Indeed.
Do you agree?
I very much agree. So I intimated some of this in my first lecture about the discontents of the contemporary university, and one of it was the balance, the relative balance between research and the educational endeavor, and how one has a tendency in research-intensive universities to overshadow the other, unfortunately. So yes, I certainly think that that's part of it.
Okay, if I may read out the next question online is, as you look forward to living till 100,
not sure I do though.
What, in your opinion, is the one societal transformation that must take place?
Societal transformation. So I think it's a big question that needs to be broken down into parts, because I suppose if we're asking about it in the context of Singapore society, the answer might be something. If it were a more generic sense of society at large across the world, then there's probably not a single answer, right? Because societies are different, and societies have different emphases, and societies have different cultural expectations and so forth, right? So if I were to confine it to Singapore society, then I think that it is, because we are quite a structured society, right? We're very sort of methodical. We're a very methodical society. We go from one thing to another, and life is quite structured in that sense. And I think that if we are to live a 100-year life, we have to be comfortable with dismantling some of that structure. If you said to me that, I'm going to live to 100, and you tell me you should stop working at 50 and then maybe come back again at 53, I might be worried. Because our structured life suggests that, what if I don't get a job again at 53, right? What if I don't have enough to live on, etc., right? So we're quite used to a certain structure in society, a certain lockstep approach to things that breaking out of that might be uncomfortable. So we need to help one another with that.
Okay. Gentleman there.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lily. My name is Barry Clark. Until recently, I was Managing Director of Routledge, Taylor and Francis here in Singapore. Thank you for referring to a British author in your references to Lewis Carroll. I hope one day we can refer to Singaporean authors in our metaphors, which brings me to my question. As we move back to more humanistic and bring back the humanities into our thinking, do you believe that we can really revive the humanities without freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and freedom of information?
So I don't think it's just about the humanities. In the STEM disciplines too, if we discover something that is contrary to received wisdom, think Copernicus. If you don't have that freedom of speech, you won't be able to make that breakthrough. So I don't think it's just about the humanities. I think in order to be able to think differently about things responsibly, then we all need to be able to speak up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, at the back.
Hi, yeah. I'm Laisan. I'm actually from URE. My question is, can you expand on the idea of integrationist, interdisciplinary, and the work-learn integration idea? How do you allow staff to make the project, their actual work, deliverable in a way that the HR or the organization will find it useful? I mean, I really like the idea of having like bites or modules and then work. That will actually help to minimize burnout that we are seeing a lot in our workforce, and also because of the more aging workforce. It is an issue, especially with the FPM ET segment. So that's like, trying to do two things at one time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to promote SMU. We have introduced something called the Industry Practice Masters, and the academic director of that seated right there. You can talk to him later. But the long and short of it is that they are small, stackable courses that you can do over time, and in each course that you do, a project that you do for coursework might actually be a project that you need to do in the workplace. So it's an assignment for you in the workplace that requires you to hand in, whatever it is that your employer expects you to do, and that project is taken as your assignment in the course as well. And the best part of it is you get professors who help you with it. So your professors are helping you with your work project as well. And that so basically it's the same piece of work that counts as both your assignment for the course as well as in the workplace as such. Gary's the academic director. He's got his hand up, and sorry, Gary. But seriously, I think we probably want to move towards that, because otherwise employers begin to think, oh, you're taking time out of your work to go for training, and we don't know whether your training is really going to be helpful or not. So integrating it becomes an investment that they want you to go to.
I think it's quite a need to change the mindset of some of the employers out there. Yes.
Yes, hi. Virginia Cha, adjunct professor at NUS. Thank you, Professor Kong. It was a very timely and insightful lecture. In NUS, we're actually going to be launching a program for the 100-year life. We call it the Distinguished Senior Fellowship Program. In fact, the preview talk is downstairs later today. The question, and by the way, we have, it's so timely, we think very much alike. We're actually going to offer classes in bite-size, seminar style, in humanities, anthropology, religion, etc. And it's intergenerational. But I have a challenge. We have a challenge. You know what that challenge is? That when we talk to, especially Singaporeans, adult learners, the first question they ask is there skills future credit? So in other words, I almost think that the learning market for the adult learning has been somewhat corrupted, in the sense that people are not willing to invest the money for their own learning if the government isn't funding 50% of it, 70% of it, 90% of it. So how do we overcome this challenge with this whole mindset change?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I think it, to the various questions that have been asked, it really does need a whole of society shift. Employers, to Casey's earlier point, employers need to think differently and be willing to have, their employees take time to go for retraining, reskilling, etc. And as universities, we can facilitate that by making the assignments coincide and so forth. But at the end of the day, we must believe in that training. Individuals need to believe in that training, and therefore, if you believe in it, you've got to invest something in it, and not just kind of expect that somebody else is investing on your behalf only. But it's a whole of society mindset shift. Universities need to shift as well, as I've been trying to say. So, to our NTU colleagues' earlier point about having gone through 30 years and not being optimistic that you'll see the change in your lifetime, I do think universities will last the next 100 years, but we do need to shift, and other parts of society need to shift as well. How do we go about doing it? I don't believe in grand gestures and grandiose schemes. I believe that in any change that we want to make, it needs to be intentional, small steps for each of us in our own work, in our own lives, to make those steps. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have time for one more question. One last question, yes.
Hi, Prof Kong.
Hi again.
Hi, Prof Chua.
Hi.
Thank you both for a very good session here. And I came especially to listen to Prof Kong.
Thank you.
Yeah. Also, I'm actually Yok Ling, and I'm from, I graduated from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, the final cohort of the MPM. Okay, so my question is that I was wondering what's of me these days, because, and I was very delighted when I saw Prof Kong's slide on galumping. That just makes sense to me that I am finally galumping, and I think I read Alice in Wonderland a long time ago and I forgot about it. So my question is actually, how could we galumpers, or those who are galumping, actually like take up, I don't know, baking courses or whatever courses, and really make it make sense such that we can like really weave it into like let's say if I were to go back to college and then I were to infuse them with this galumping enthusiasm and teach them so that they can be master chefs or whatever, the Wheeling Lows or whatever, so that it's not just like I'm just doing it out of fun, but yeah, I'm motivated by fun, by that, you know, lively spirit, but I want it to be like beneficial and to really make the rest who are imbibed with my enthusiasm to bring it to greater heights. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that it's a difficult thing. I mean, even individually, for some of us, we might be uncomfortable with galumping, right? Like, what's this? I mean, when I graduated, my mother would have flipped if I said I was just going to go travel for a year or whatever. Like, get a job, be useful, earn a keep, and so forth, right? And we've grown up in those sorts of ways, and that's understandable with what we've come through as a society, as a nation, as individuals. But perhaps if we think about galumping as not just frivolity,
yes,
but that sometimes some of that can actually be enriching for self, that might yield dividends down the road. But it's a mindset shift, and it's different, and it's not for everyone, and indeed I don't intend for everyone to be just kind of meandering
yes,
around all the time. So, you know, it works for some, doesn't for others, it works for some at certain points in time, not for others. But what I'm suggesting is a little bit of loosening on the margin, not a wholesale revolution, not anarchy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof Kong.
It's really investing for the future. And
yeah,
you really have to think about it. It's not just
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
out of frivolous.
Thank you, Prof.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, thank you very much, Lily. I
Thank
think
you.
We've come to the end today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof Kong and Prof Chua. We've come to the end of today's lecture. We would like to hear your views on the event. Please click our link on the Facebook feed or scan the QR code on the screen to submit your feedback. Professor Kong's third and last lecture, titled Beyond the Ivory Tower, Research and the Dilemmas of Quality and Relevance, will take place on 27 November. Details will be on our website and IPS Facebook page. We hope to see you then. Thank you all for attending today's lecture. Have a good evening ahead.